A few weeks ago, I sat right here to give you my initial tracking data on this platform. I had cameras rolling and then my microphone died mid-session. Total equipment failure. But honestly, that was a blessing in disguise because the first impression videos usually only tell you what a system feels like when it's shiny and new out of the box. They don't tell you how it actually lives. So I didn't stop training. I kept hitting the range, kept feeding it fuel, and as of today, I have 800 cycles through this setup. 800 iterations is well past the honeymoon phase. The finish is covered in carbon, the frame is worn, and the aftermarket adjustments that I dropped in have completely settled. On paper, this layout should be a total home run for me. It's a classic compact frame, it's optics ready, and it has an integrated compensation system built right into the factory barrel and slide geometry. I've even got it paired with a Sealy wall enclosed RMR optic to keep the glass clear of the port blast. But market specs do not always translate to how a system feels on the clock. Today we're diving into a standardized 800 round breakdown. I'm going to show you the data from my bench scale to how it handled my cold start drills and why my ultimate conclusion on this platform is complicated. I don't hate it, but I definitely don't love it yet. Let's get into it. Let's start with the heart of my frustrations, the press behavior. Now, if you look up common feedback on this specific design family, you'll usually hear people rave about the out-of-the-box system. It has a massive reputation in the striker-fired world for being crisp and predictable right from factory. But on this specific compensated model, I just wasn't feeling it. Out of the box, the brake felt heavy, a bit unrefined, and it simply didn't match the performance vibe of a platform with integrated porting. CZ P10C ported, trigger pull weight, first attempt, almost 5 pounds, second attempt, 5.1, 5.2. Fix that, I picked up an internal tuning kit from HB Industries that came with two options, a minus 10% and a minus 15% reduced weight component. Now, altering the factory weight on a defensive carry style setup can be a slippery slope. If you go too light, you risk a mushy reset, or worse, reliability issues that turn your tool into paperweight when you actually need it to function. I benchmarked both options on my scale. The minus 15% setup dropped the weight down to pure competition territory. I wanted a clean balance of real-world performance and absolute reliability. New trigger is installed. Let's check the weight and we'll talk about it. 4 pounds. That take an average of 3 attempts. Second attempt, 4.4 or 4.3. 4. Yeah, so out of the 3, it's around 4 point-ish. So I settled on a configuration I've been running for majority of this 800 rounds test. The setup that sits consistently right at the 4-pound mark. At 4 pounds, the metrics on paper look phenomenal. The take-up is smooth, the wall is defined, the brake is objectively lighter. But the weight is only half the story. A mechanical interface can be light, but still lack a soul. Even at 4 pounds, after hundreds of live fire iterations, the actual character of the brake still hasn't completely won over me. It's safe, it's consistent, it functions perfectly, but it lacks that crisp glass rod snap that makes a platform truly addictive to shoot. But the numbers on the workbench don't mean anything until you put them on a timer. Let's head to the range and look at how this 4-pound configuration actually translates to target performance under pressure. To see if my workbench adjustments actually paid off under pressure, I put the system through my standardized evaluation drills, starting with the draw on fire baseline. When I first took this platform out of the holster cold, it wasn't just slow, I was working against my own training history. My first couple of reps were clocking in past the 2.15 second mark. That is the physical manifestation of my brain expecting my daily carry mechanic or my RM1C presentation angle coming up short and forcing my hands to micro adjust down the sideline before breaking the shot. Once my hands adapted to the physical platform, my operational baseline stabilized directly around the 1.76 second average. But when you lock it in perfectly, this setup can move. My absolute best clean iteration downrange dropped to 1.46 seconds. Next up is the throttle control test. Now, traditionally, the standard speed string is a 6-shot build drill, but because I'm running a hard 10 round local capacity limit here, I modified this to a 5-shot string. Doing this lets me maximize every single capacity unit downrange, splitting one 10 round device perfectly into 2 complete sets. If you train in a restricted area, this is a massive time saver that cuts your bench loading time in half. Watching the slow motion footage of these 5-shot bursts, the mechanics look great. The gas vents out of the top ports beautifully, and the Sealy Wolf enclosed window stayed completely clear of my carbon blast. Mechanically, this system stays flat, but practically on the clock, I run into some serious issues. Even with just a 5-shot string, I was having a genuinely hard time keeping the system naturally pointed on target. Doesn't point naturally. During this rapid fire bursts, the presentation felt unnatural to the point where I was actually throwing some shots off target. Now, throwing those shots isn't a mechanical flow with the hardware. It's a direct conflict with my personal muscle memory. I spent the vast majority of my training time with my daily carry mechanic and the RM1C. Those options have very specific grip geometry and presentation angle that my hands are completely locked into. When I present either of those, the dot naturally populates right in the center of my vision without me having to think about it. This platform presents a completely different angle. Under speed, that means I'm constantly having to spend microseconds actively fighting my own habits to pull the red dot back into the center of the Sealy Wolf window. Mechanically, the porting is absolutely doing its job to mitigate tracking movement, but ergonomically, if the presentation angle doesn't align with your established habits, all the engineering in the world won't help keep your rapid fire groups tight on the clock. While we're on the frame, let's talk about the actual surface texture itself. A lot of people talk about this specific design line having an incredibly aggressive, almost painful texturing. But after spending real time with it, my takeaway is that it's just okay. It's decent enough to keep a hold of, but it could definitely be better. Compared to other modern laser or factory texturing patterns coming out of the market today, this feels a little bit unrefined. It doesn't quite give you that deep locked in bite, but it gets the job done. This disconnect became glaringly obvious when I ran my reaction strings from low ready doubles. Look at the data set right here. I broke the first shot in 1.59 seconds, but then it took a massive 0.92 seconds to fire shot number 2. Why? Because the presentation felt unnatural. I broke the shot, and the tracking impulse combined with an unfamiliar handle angle caused the red dot to vanish completely from my red dot window. I had to physically pause, recenter, wait for the side picture to reappear. Even when I pushed the platform to its peak threshold, clocking a 1.14 second low ready presentation and a 0.48 second split, it felt like a battle. Right after the string, I lowered it and said it out loud to the camera. Doesn't point naturally to me. Your hands and eyes are actively working twice as hard to constantly correct the presentation path mid-air. Now, let's look at what happens when you push through transitions under local capacity limits. I was running a 4-round transition drill, 2 shots on target A, 2 shots on target B. But because the factory 10-round feeding devices for this platform are either impossible to find or ridiculously expensive right now, I was utilizing third-party training units. And as many training enthusiasts know, aftermarket feeding devices sometimes introduce major mechanical variables. Watch this string. I break the first shot on target A with a fast 0.4 second split. But because of the aftermarket device, the internal follower failed to engage the slide stop lever. The slide didn't lock open on empty. I transitioned to target B, built my sight picture, pressed, only to hear a hollow click on an empty chamber. Hearing a click instead of bang means I had to manually diagnose a failure on the clock. I had to physically tap and rack, realize the internal chamber was completely dry, dump the aftermarket unit, seat a fresh one, and completely replenish the system. It took 6.54 seconds to recover. That hurdle taught me two massive things about this layout. First, the low-profile factory controls feel incredibly recessed when you're rushing to manipulate the system under diagnostic panic. Second, it actually validated my internal component modification. Hearing that sharp click on an empty chamber proved my 4-pound configuration has zero ignition lag and perfect striking power. The internal mechanics didn't fail me over 800 iterations. The training accessories did. So, where do we stand after 800 cycles? On paper, this platform is an incredibly competent tool. It is reliable with duty loads. The integrated porting absolutely mitigates tracking movement. And once you make those internal adjustments to smooth out the factory behavior, you get clean, predictable 4-pound metric on the bench. But high volume training reveals true mechanical tolerances, and this test exposed some pickiness. Toward the end of the day, this platform flat out didn't like certain types of high volume range fuel. I ran into noticeable feeding issues with specific brand of low-cost range ammunition where the cartridge geometry or the case coating caused some friction on the feed ramp. Now, normally you can just chalk that up to low-tier fuel problems, except for one thing. My RM1C chewed through the exact same range fuel without a single issue. When a standard duty tool eats everything you feed it, but your more expensive ported platform chokes on high-volume training supplies, it's a data point you cannot ignore if you're looking for a primary do-it-all option. A tool is ultimately an extension of your personal mechanics and training expectations. A system can check every box on a spreadsheet, but still feel like an appliance. For me, because this grip geometry actively fights the muscle memory I've built up over thousands of reps with my daily carry canic and my RM1C, it feels like I'm constantly wrestling this setup to just keep my groups standard. If I have to fight a platform's natural point of aim, watch my fuel choices closely, and work with surface stippling that is only average at helping me retain it, it simply is not a layout I can bond with. If you love this specific factory presentation angle, it's an absolute workhorse. But for me, it's a highly functional machine that just hasn't found its soul. Have you ever owned a setup that checked every single box on paper but just couldn't win you over on the range? Let me know in the comments below. Let's talk about it. This was certainly an interesting experiment. If you haven't noticed, my words were very vague to say the least. I'm trying to see if this algorithm likes my videos now. So bear with me. I'm going to make a few more just to continue this experiment. So bear with me. If it performs the same as my other videos, then I'll get back to the regular language. But for now, I'm just going to keep using this and see if it improves the results on my channel. Until then, I'll see you in the next one.